Guests, colleagues, excellencies, so proud and honored to be here to open this year's SEI Science Forum, an SEI institution and tradition that we've had for about 15 years, which has many times circulated around the world and have been hosted by different SEI centers, but most often in Stockholm, I think, and this year here. And for a couple of years recently, we've also kept it internal to really focus on our sort of internal learning and knowledge sharing and developing our new ideas and strategies. But this year we decided to take the opportunity to also invite some of our closest and most important partners here in this part of the world, at least. So we're gathering today partners and colleagues, about 50 colleagues, I think, about 50 external guests. This year it also marks the first year of our new strategy at SEI called Transitions in Turbulent Times. It looks like this. And when I was actually in Colombia, in our Bogota Latin America Center a couple of weeks ago, there were partners I met with that said, wow, that was a lot of foresight in talking about turbulent times. And well, I must say that already maybe 2 years ago when we started working on this, we felt that it was pretty turbulent. But little did we know what was to come. So I will not go into the strategy itself much, but just to say that it builds on, you could say, 5 mega trends in the world, 5 issues that we felt we must tackle as an institute. One is the crisis of multilateralism and the geopolitical situation and security crisis, which is underlying that. It's manifesting very strongly in this part of the world, but I think it's being felt everywhere in the world. And it's also reverberating in a fairly dysfunctional UN system at the moment. The second is the widening action gap when it comes to climate, biodiversity, pollution, the environmental crisis, and the goals we have set to deal with it. That gap is increasing all the time, so we must accelerate the implementation. The third is technology and technology transition that is ongoing. For example, renewable energy, electrification, decarbonization in industry. In 2023, the global solar capacity additions were surging by 74%. In 2024, another 600 gigawatts was added to global capacity. This is all like only a couple of years ago, that was the total installed capacity all over the world. So we have an additional pace of clean electricity coming online, which is actually on target to meet the 2030 goal of tripling renewable energy. But coming with that is, of course, side effects. And the fourth challenge, megatrend, is the competition for land and conflict over land and resources. The green transition is driving new demand for minerals, mines, bioresources, and land. And here is no win-win at the local level. There are many competing uses, communities at risk, and competing interests. So allocation and planning must be governed very carefully. Connecting to that, the fifth and final mega trend is the social inequities and the rising inequalities that are happening all over the world. We now see how the wealth distribution, where the share of wealth held by the richest 10% or richest 1% is always constantly increasing. And those that are at risk and are losing out on this and at risk when it comes to competing for land, they are also sometimes turning against green actions because they are feeling the side effects. And this must be carefully dealt with because that is also contributing to difficult politics. But out of these kind of trends has emerged some new trends some new themes that we are working on, including minerals and mining, migration, the nexus between the green transition and security, and AI, of course, and how to produce more effective finance to accelerate action. So these are kind of long-term research areas that we have embarked upon now. So I would say like the collective intelligence of SCI gave a pretty good prediction of what are the main issues to deal with moving forward. What we didn't see coming perhaps was the US politics that have happened and the policies, if you can call them that. It's foreign policy not based on facts or even national interest, but based on emotion and resentment and bitterness. An attack on the science system, an attack on the United Nations, disengagement from diplomacy, disengagement from aid, and of course an attack on anything related to climate and sustainability. So this has caused a lot of turmoil, desperation, even losses of life around the world. And connecting to the US aid shutdown. And we're, of course, in the Institute, we're watching this very carefully. But I remain convinced that SCI and similar institutions should not swing from our long-term mission to advance evidence and facts to support decision-making and policy-making. We remain steadfast in our belief that we can have a better world when we provide science and evidence to provide that support. Of course, the AI frontier will undoubtedly transform the process by which such science is produced and communicated. And we have to be on the frontier of this AI revolution as an institute. So we've established a task force already 2 years ago, which has now been sort of transitioned into a permanent working group. Look both to analyze the sustainability implications of AI, positive and negative, as well as providing internal guidance, checks and balances, how to use AI in research, in communications, in all our operations. So finally, I just want to reflect about, this is my 8th year as executive director of SCI. So the work we do, the innovation capabilities, the brilliance, the passion, the commitment of all our workers, all our co-workers and colleagues. It's really humbling, and I'm very proud and honored and feel privileged to be able to serve and support you colleagues here today. Thank you very much. And I will now have the great honor to introduce our introductory speaker, Mr. Daniel Westlén, who is a Swedish physicist, Liberal Party member, serving as State Secretary to the Minister for Climate and Environment. He has a PhD in reactor physics from KTH and a strong background in the energy sector, had roles in Vattenfall, Forsmark and SKB. So Daniel brings a lot of technical expertise to the policy area he's working on, and is a key figure and advocate for Sweden's green transition, electrification, infrastructure investment, etc., which I'm sure you will talk more about. Welcome up here, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you, Måns, and thank you all for inviting me to come and to speak to you today. It's a privilege for me to share the stage with all the experts that I see in the program of today. I regret that I can't be here all day because it looks really interesting the afternoon you're going to have. In the invitation for today's event, we were asked whether we choose between sustainability, security, or economic growth. It's quite the opposite, obviously. I claim that stopping climate change, halting the loss of biodiversity and ending pollution goes hand in hand with a competitive and growing economy and also our security. Now, I guess that's what we were expected to say. But anyway, I guess it has to be said in the introduction. To solve the 3 planetary crises, we need to find new ways of tackling ancient challenges and to meet human needs. The ways we know of already, they have to become more efficient. While new solutions and improved resource efficiency is the key to solving our environmental problems, they are also the fundament of economic growth. So basically, this is the same thing we're trying to do. This insight is the background of why the Swedish government is making record high commitments to invest in research and innovations. We want Sweden to lead the green transition through technological development. We're preparing for the unknown, and we create conditions for technological breakthroughs. This is good for the Swedish and for the global economy, and it accelerates the transition of a sustainable towards a sustainable society, which was the point in the first place. We're already seeing this happening. In all sectors, new technologies are put to work to reduce our impact on the planet while our lives keep improving. The global transition both drives and requires innovation. Solutions for fossil-free transport are developed and improved at an impressive pace, reducing costs in the process. There are solutions for climate neutrality in all major industry sectors. Technology for recycling materials that was just a few years ago treated as waste are being implemented as we speak. Both public and industry sectors have been driving this development. The transition presents a major opportunity for Swedish companies, which are in many cases the global leaders in technologies that we need to reduce our impact on the planet. The global competition is intensifying. There is a fierce technological race underway. Other European countries, the US and China have all launched initiatives and are investing heavily to strengthen their domestic technological capabilities. This is very good news because it brings us all closer to solving the three environmental crises. But also this means that the advantage that Sweden has had is shrinking. Swedes can take pride in the fact that the highly research and technology intensive businesses in our country are successfully participating in the race. But to stay competitive for the Swedish economy, continued high quality research and innovation is essential. This calls for strong funding and clear prioritization of top quality research. And obviously, this goes for all the other countries as well. And this race is, as I said, very good news because it brings us the solution we need faster and more efficiently. In this context, we must all focus on the research areas where we have the greatest potential to be world leading, because not everybody is going to be experts on everything. To keep the edge, the Swedish government is investing in excellence centers for breakthrough technologies. The funding is being ramped up, and by 2028 we will be spending over 1.2 billion Swedish kronor annually. These investments target technology areas identified by the research community. In addition, the government is making targeted investments in research on metals, minerals, and batteries. The government also directs funding specifically to artificial intelligence. This includes excellence centers for AI, doctoral schools for AI, and a mandate for the Swedish Research Council to coordinate these matters in and for research. We cannot predict the future. Our research and innovation policy must account for the unknown. Therefore, we must invest also in fundamental science in line with the applied research that I was just talking about. This is the way for countries to be well prepared for the future. Altogether, the research and innovation bill that the Swedish government presented in December 2024 was the largest one ever. We increased funding by 6.5 billion Swedish kronor, so that's roughly $650 million by 2028. So that's the increase from what we already have. Experience shows us that large investments in research must be matched by efforts to utilize the research results. Investments in utilization and commercialization of research are therefore a key part of this research bill. Strengthened research investments must be complemented by initiatives to commercialize. The bill contains several measures to this end, aiming to strengthen the Swedish innovation system and to increase return on public investments. Industry accounts for about 3/4 of all R&D spendings in Sweden. It's crucial that the private sector continues to invest and where the public funding can act as a lever. Collaboration is one of the key strengths that we have. Environmental research plays a crucial role in driving and developing effective climate and environmental policy. It's fundamental to such policy because without knowledge, we have no chance of developing the policies that will give us the change that we so desperately need. This, of course, is especially true in the field of climate and environment. Therefore, research must be both relevant and of high quality. It should also be in line with the practical work we have to do to solve the 3 crises that we're facing. The research contributes to solving global problems, but it also lays the foundation for profitable businesses. Businesses will prosper from the solutions that we develop. Looking ahead, the climate-related research needs to focus on effective ways to eliminate emissions, the emissions that can be removed, reduce those that cannot be entirely eliminated, while it also leads to the most efficient and impactful climate adaptation measures possible. In light of this, we're extending the National Research Programme on Climate in the Research and Innovation Bill. We want to see an increased focus on research into how emission reductions and negative emissions can be achieved more efficiently across all sectors of society. We're also increasing investments in the National Research Programme on Seas and Water. The aim is to counteract eutrophication and the spread of hazardous substances, ensure secure access to water in the right quantity and quality, and to promote and protect biodiversity. Access to drinking water was never a problem in this country, but it's increasingly so. So this has become a field where we have to focus more for our national needs, where it used to be that our research in this field, the drinking water field, was more focused on other countries. So that's new to us. We have presented a new research program on chemicals. Society's ability to prevent and manage risks associated with chemicals and waste needs to be improved as part of the development toward a more circular economy. At the same time, research and innovation are required to develop sustainable alternatives. In the invitation for the seminar, we were asked, it talked about solution-oriented leadership. I claim that Sweden shows such leadership, and we develop and commercialize the solutions needed in a small world with a large population living in prosperity. We will fix climate, biodiversity and pollution by working together. There is great urgency, but there is also great possibility for those who come up with the solutions. Thank you all for listening, and keep up your good work.
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's session. Transitions in Turbulent Times, Partnering for Impact. We're really happy to have all of you in the room today, and of course we also have an audience online. Welcome. Before I get started, my name is Artie Davis. I work with the Leadership Group for Industry Transition at SEI headquarters. I will be your moderator for the day. I will start with some boring admin. Should the lights go on, should there be showers and sprinklers, please make your way through the fire emergency exits at the back, past the red tables and to the main road where we will gather should there be any problems. There are plenty of staff that will help you find your way, but please move in an orderly manner. The bathrooms, did you need those? Again, past those red tables to the left. You'll pass a number of rooms, but the bathrooms are there, don't give up. Lastly, I request everyone to keep their mobiles on silent out of respect for the people on the stage. Okay, let's start. You've heard a lot this morning. Economic growth, security, and sustainability are often seen to be competing agendas. But what if, in the next chapter of development, we can find bold and practical ways of achieving all three? We have SEI experts from around the world to help us answer those questions. I'm going to call them on stage. I'd like to invite David Perkey, Center Director, SEI Latin America. I'm going to be reading fast, so we save time for conversation. Romanas Ipio, Program Leader, SEI Africa. Sarah West, Center Director, SEI York. Ivo Krustik, Head of Unit and Senior Expert, SEI Tallinn. And Sarah Vigeon, please, Senior Research Fellow, SEI Asia. Great. Ivo, I'd like to start with you. Security is a term that is shifting, be it with regard to military alliances, energy independence, climate resilience. These are often seen at odds with sustainable development. What is SEI, what is your office doing to reform and recategorize this debate?
We have been in a very interesting situation in SEI Tallinn because our kind of historic perspective has been working with these transitional societies like Estonia, the Baltic countries, and from that perspective we have been able to kind of take these issues, these questions about our energy independence and our wish to kind of preserve these values as a way to build upon. So we've done a lot of analysis in these countries that today we are transitioning to countries who are EU hopeful, who are moving towards the EU, and countries like Ukraine and Moldova, where our competences in areas like decarbonizing energy systems or like you mentioned, decarbonizing industries are of high value because they come from a place where we've been able to actually build upon our experience in these countries.
So I want to come then with that to Latin America and ask you, David, because of course we come with our assumptions about Latin America, natural resources, biodiversity, but you're working now very much on the ground there and looking at the challenges you face in terms of political and social headwinds. From your perspective, how do we build up to a global level from regional expertise and the experiences you're having on the ground?
Thank you for the question. And yes, Latin America is a beautifully biodiverse, rich, culturally rich place that has enormous potential. But there also are limitations on how fast that potential can be realized. And thinking about approaches that we can use to really bring these opportunities to scale, I wanted to mention one collaboration that we have with a university in Northern Colombia, where we've developed an accredited academic short course on wind power production. Wind power is one of the great opportunities for renewable expansion in Colombia, but there's a lot of mystery and sort of uncertainty about how wind projects are developed. So in this short course, which results in the participants getting a diploma of some sort to prove they took the course, experts on wind project development, the technologies, the economics, are sharing that information with community leaders who are sharing information on local governance and territorial planning and decision making. And that space of co-learning then creates the enabling conditions to accelerate the expansion of renewable energy, which will be key for Colombia to be able to accelerate the phase out of fossil fuel production.
David, I just want to pick up on some of the words you said and of course come to Sarah next. De-risking uncertainty when it comes to wind power. It's a critical way forward to actually help capacity build when it comes to taking collaboration to the next level. We see this in the work that we're doing with renewable energy, of course. So the impacts of expanding networks become something really important to keep in our roadmap. Sarah, SEI, of course, and we've heard about it now a little bit from the speakers before you, but I come to you for this as well, works in two ways. It's grounded, it's embedded, but it's global as well. And you're working, of course, with the mobility shifts when it comes to climate change and mobility. I want to ask you from SEI's perspective, how can we use this to drive broader change?
Thank you very much for this question. So We see around the world that migration is already a response to climate impact. So many people are moving in response to climate risks, not just as a last resort option, but very importantly through everyday strategic movements to manage risk, access livelihoods, and diversify their income. But also it's important to understand that climate responses are also shaping mobility and migration. So on the one hand, people are being displaced by climate mitigation and adaptation. Policies, for example, for conservation, carbon offsetting, and even renewable energy. And on the other hand, countries in the so-called global north will increasingly need migration to fill labor gaps in care, in construction, and definitely in the green economy, especially as demographic decline accelerates. We've been working on migration across several continents, and that's what makes SEI so special, that we can draw lessons across continents. And for example, when we look at migration in Africa and Asia as it relates to climate change, we see very uneven policy responses. So for example, in Africa, climate-related migration features very prominently in policy debates, but very often through a securitized lens. Whereas in Asia, migration policy focuses mostly on trafficking, on labor markets, and on remittances, while the climate dimension is often overlooked. Working across continents and contexts helps expose blind spots, to draw lessons, and to highlight where governance needs to catch up with reality. Our work helps shift the conversation from how do we stop migration to how do we understand its role amid profound environmental and political shifts and unlock its potential as part of climate, economic, and development solutions. If we don't understand and plan for migration, we risk planning for failure in our economies, in our climate goals, and in our societies.
Sarah, thanks. And I want to come to Romanis, of course, with this, because you've touched upon some important points. Where we stand is where we sit, and how we look at different problems. And of course, we stand a huge risk at collapsing complexity into simplified narratives. Romanis SEI Africa. And as I say that, I apologize, because I understand Africa, of course, many countries, many communities, many economic agendas. But in this moment, you speak for the continent. And I'd like to ask you to tell the audience, to talk to us, what have we as policymakers misunderstood here? What are you seeing as some of the complexity being lost as it goes from where you sit to where we are today?
Thank you, Arati, for that. Yeah, you've elevated me to present on Africa, which I'll try. Yeah, just to appreciate the kind of work we do in Africa in relation to the conflict and also in relation to what Sarah has highlighted. I think there's a lot of misconception that it's only enough to map the conflict, the mobility, climate mobility, but we miss out the end, which is the conflict, because of these scarce resources, where you find, for example, in arid and semi-arid lands, where people have to move to graze their land, and when they are doing this, they also interfere with other community who are practicing crop agriculture, which at times people miss out. And when we develop policies, we find sector-specific instead of integrated policy as a solution to sort out this. So I think that's a misconception where we miss out. And when you do that, then we also slow down in terms of how we can also inform acceleration of implementing all of these research outputs. Yeah.
Working in silos, I think everyone in the room can speak to that, and it's slowing us down. Now, of course, for all the centres on stage today, we see a changing pattern in funding. We see a changing pattern in aid. This can be an opportunity, however. It can ask us to dig down and find new partnerships that allow us to continue the work, that allow us to keep talking and doing the work that is so important to drive the change that we're all part of. So, Sarah, I want to come to you at SEI York. You've started doing this with amazing results. Tell us more.
Yeah, I'm only representing one city. So SEI York has got a really diverse funding base. We've got about 100 live projects at the moment, and all of our projects are done in partnership with other organisations, funded by a whole range of different people. And so our partners range from schools, for example, on many of the projects that I work on in the citizen science space, to the private sector, so companies such as IKEA and Maersk and Google, and industrial alliances, so the Alliance for Clean Air, the Climate Clean Air Coalition, really important partners for us. And it's a sort of a big jigsaw puzzle of managing the time and the projects of everyone in the centre. It's just a big jigsaw of people's time. But those partnerships really allow us to do what we're trying to do with the new strategy, which is move from just talking about doing the research to moving into that implementation space. So actually making sure that our research is getting used by the people who need to be making the changes. And we think that doing that by involving those partners actually in the research right from the beginning is the way to go about it. So like I said, we've got a whole range of different funders on our projects, and that partnership working is really key to that, us actually seeing our research have impact in the world.
So of course you're talking about research to impact, stakeholder engagement when it comes to research to impact. So there's a stronger ownership on the projects. That also of course introduces potential dangers in terms of implementation, how you move. So Ivo, David, Sarah, I want to come back to you to ask you a question in all your different fields. You're working, of course, all of us are, in this kind of turbulent time. And you're working with strategic foresight, one of SDI's focus areas. How do you work with strategic foresight and not give in to some of the transactions, the climate impacts, the chaos that requires immediate reaction, given the stakeholder groups you're working with? David, I'm going to ask you that first.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. And when I was thinking about a possible response, I was reminded of work we are doing in SCI Latin America related to the very chaotic expansion of lithium production from endorheic watersheds in the southern Andes, Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. The things are moving very, very quickly. The projections of increased demand or possibly tenfold increase in demand at a global level before 2040. And so it's a very challenging space to try to think about long-range planning and making informed decision-makings when things are moving so quickly. And one strategy that we've used that's also an example of partnerships is trying to really connect the research that we're doing in specific systems to academic experts. It's one project we're doing in Argentina. We've managed to connect to something called the Mesa Académica de Litio, which is a group of professors who organize themselves with expertise on various topics relevant to this topic. Sort of geology, hydrogeology, climatology, ecology, sociology. And working with that partner, I think, gives us a little bit of credibility and permanence to the work we do, so that, when our project funding runs out, there's still a community of people who are committed and engaged to this type of rational thinking about the expansion of this mineral, which could bring great benefits, but also poses great risks. So that's an example, I think, of how we're trying to slow down a little bit in a chaotic landscape.
So credibility in the partnerships. Ivo.
I think SCI is really strong in resilience, and resilience in a very broad understanding. So from the perspective of resilient to climate systems, to natural systems, but also from the perspective of man-made infrastructure and communities. And we're learning more and more ways into tying this together with these questions about security and competitiveness and how to work with that. So if there is a wish or a voice to kind of implement energy policy based on drill, baby, drill, we can kind of look at it and say, not only is it not sustainable, but it's also not a way to build up security. It's not a way to build up resilience. And this is why when we're working with projects, for example, in Ukraine, we see that they are looking for their security, their resilience coming from renewable sources and their competitiveness as well.
Sarah.
Yeah, just to pick up on what David said about universities. So SEI York is unique amongst the SEI family in that all our staff are actually employees of the University of York. And so that means that we have that kind of drive to have to produce academically rigorous work. So we're actually not very good at publishing SEI publications because we're actually spending all our time writing academic journal articles. Sorry, comms team. But that does give us that gives us the credibility that all our partners like to see, but it also means that we're really well linked to the other members of the academic community at the university. And exactly as David described, working in partnership, whether that's with academics or whether that was governments or the private sector, that's again where that change happens. And so it's investing time in those relationships, making sure that just because your project ends, it's not like, bye, I'm off to do something else now, that you've got those continuous relationships going. And it might well never lead to funding. And we're all, at SEI, we're always very worried about where the next money's coming from. But, actually, it's just about saying, well, this is an important relationship. These are people on the ground who can make a difference. I need to work with them to get that to happen.
So I want to come from this discussion on partnership and how you can actually protect and de-risk the work that's being done to Sarah and Romanus, because, of course, we talk about SEI being a research centre, research to policy, science-based actions. Now, of course, in the areas you're working with, climate and mobility, hugely fraught with discussions and debate. How do you work with the research to create change on the ground? Sarah, I'll ask you first, then Romanus, I'll ask you second.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this is one of the topics where research is extremely important. So, first of all, I'd like to start by saying that migration is a key justice issue, because the place where you are born, as arbitrary as it can be, plays a defining role in the rest of your destiny and your future. Migration can help level inequalities around the world. It can help spur innovation. It can help support more inclusive development. Also important to note that only 3% of the global population are international migrants. And despite this small percentage, migration remains one of the most debated, instrumentalized, and politically misunderstood issues of our time. Research has long shown that closing borders and deterrence policies do not stop migration. They only make it more dangerous and more deadly. As long as inequalities persist in some places and labor needs persist in others, people will continue to move. Well-governed migration supports adaptation and stability. Poorly governed migration increases vulnerability. And what research does fundamentally is to help us distinguish between the two and help us design policies that are more just, effective, durable, and that are actually beneficial for societies beyond myths. SEI brings a unique perspective in this topic. As an environmental institute, we don't study migration in isolation from climate and environmental change, but as an intrinsic part of sustainable development processes. Good climate policy recognizes that people will move and helps make that movement safer, fairer, and more sustainable.
Romanus.
Yes, Sarah, you've said everything, but anyway, let me add just a component, because looking at the partnership and the interest, we must map out the interest in terms of who is interested in this particular work. And we found things like conflict, migration, requires government support and government buy-in, so that at the end of the project, you have people who can continue the agenda with the community, because community is already stressed. So when you try to research and they give you what is affecting them, and then you leave them because the project has ended, it really leaves a very bad taste in the community. So working with the government and the other partners who are localized in that particular area becomes an important way of having a lasting partnership with the community.
So if I'm going to come back to you and tell the audience what I think I've heard, please correct me if I'm wrong. There is, of course, commonality in everything you're saying. Understanding, debunking myths, ecosystem landscapes, informed decision-making, and stakeholder engagement leading to accountability.
Great.
Audience, if you'd like to join your hands, give us a warm round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
Welcome to SEI.
Thank you.
We are now going to take a short break for about 10 minutes where you can reflect, process, grab some coffee, try and find the washrooms, and then come back in 10 minutes so we can continue. Thank you very much. So you've now heard from our SEI experts around the world. You've heard about the need for strategic foresight and planning in a time of turbulence. To provide reflections on what you've heard, our external speaker, Arti Gupta, Zenison Visiting Professor of Climate Change Leadership from Uppsala University. Arti, I'd like to welcome you on stage, my namesake. Spelt the right way.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me, to Mons, to Asa, to Arati, indeed my namesake, an unusual thing, but very happy to be sharing this stage with you. It's a privilege to be here and to share some brief reflections. I wanted to, first of all, commend SEI for this effort to try to identify opportunities and to realize these three compelling objectives: sustainability, security, and economic growth, competitiveness. Of course, that's a very ambitious undertaking, but it's a worthy one. And as it so happens, the EU Scientific Advisory Council on Climate Change just released their report suggesting that indeed it is possible to have ambitious EU climate policies looking to the future to 2040 while enhancing security and competitiveness. So certainly this is a commendable objective and important to identify those opportunities. And I also want to commend SEI on this focus on solutions. So this is the objective of this session as well, to identify solutions and to focus on solution-oriented leadership. And not only on problem diagnoses. And I think that's very, very crucial also, especially when problem diagnoses can tend to be in this in our turbulent times, can be couched in the language of crises and emergencies. And as I've tried to do in my own work, I think that can be dangerous, this framing of crisis and emergencies in terms of problem framings, not only because, of course, a framing of emergency and crisis can be seen as, well, doom and gloom, but also setting aside democratic decision-making procedures or considerations of justice. So in an emergency, everything is on the table, and it's a us versus them kind of mentality. So I think there it's very, very important, if one is thinking about solution-oriented leadership, to think about, when one talks about crisis, it also has implications for what kind of solutions I imagine, what sorts of visions for possible solutions become possible in an emergency type of framing. And so there, I think it's as important to identify false solutions that one needs to fight against, as well as identifying sort of the important, the good opportunities. So seeking out the good and the real solutions, but at the same time identifying false solutions that might be perpetuated by some under a sort of framing of crisis and emergency. And here, one of those potentially false solutions, I think SEI is working in the area of minerals and mining, etc., could be deep seabed mining, very controversial, an area where science and scientists are themselves very contested about this. But it could be one of these false solutions where there are ecological impacts, but also exacerbation of geopolitical tensions, and as well exacerbating global inequalities. And my own work, I've focused on another one of these false solutions, and that is to address, say, the climate problem. And that false solution is solar geoengineering, or efforts to dim the sun. And this is this idea that you're going to inject sulfate aerosols or reflective particles into the stratosphere as a way to reflect some incoming sunlight back out into space and have a cooling effect on the planet. Now, this planet-altering technology, it's speculative, it's highly risky, and the EU is very, very cautious about this, and it could greatly exacerbate not only climate impacts in the future, but also geopolitical tensions and inequalities and unequal global impacts of the climate problem. But of course, this is being promoted now by a small group of elite institutions, largely in the UK and the US, and also funded by Silicon Valley tech billionaires and investors. So this is a small group with outsized influence and deep pockets. So in that sense, it becomes very, very important to also, here I see the important role of scientists and science institutions to speak out against these false solutions. And I have tried to do that in my own work as an academic, but also bringing together, co-initiating an academic coalition calling for non-use of solar geoengineering, so calling on political actors to take this option off the table as a future climate policy intervention. And also because my own work focuses on anticipatory governance of environmental challenges. So how can we devise governance institutions in the present to address future harm? And our work on solar geoengineering has shown that it would be highly implausible that we could ever have the global governance architectures to govern a planet-altering technology of this nature in a fair and effective and stable manner over decades or centuries. Now, why is this important? To focus as well on taking the false solutions off the table. I think it was also mentioned by Mans and others that SEI has had a sort of leading role in fossil fuel non-proliferation, debate, and for example, the production gap report has been very influential. So one argument we make is that the fossil fuel non-proliferation initiative, for example, or these good solutions actually need to go hand in hand with taking the false solutions off the table. Their success depends on us taking these other alternatives off the table. Because if we don't, then having a sort of plan B option like solar geoengineering on the table will ensure a delay in the kind of deep decarbonization, fossil fuel phase out that we need to see. So for that reason, I think it's absolutely essential that we focus on both sides of the coin. And I think SEI is uniquely well positioned, of course, to promote both the real solutions as well as focus on taking these false solutions off the table with its global centers, its global voice, and its very, very legitimate scientific input into policy processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And of course, what we've heard during the course of the day is the importance of course, aligning positions. And conflict and discussion needs to be part of that. Finding long-term outcomes for short-term crises, as you touch upon, and emergencies is critical to providing resilience that we heard about also today. Now, SEI, of course, has a science council to help adjudicate on these matters and take those decisions. Thank you very much. So the next part of the session will be part of what you will do after we end our on-stage event. Every one of you has been given a table assignment, a number from 1 to 4. These tables are outside in the red area, and they will be hosted by facilitators and task members to help you discuss the inspiration, the feedback, the networking that you will take from what you hear on stage. This part of the program is to provide that inspiration for you. You will hear 5 different talks to give you ideas for discussion, to steal a trademark, TED Talk style. Our first talk is by Charlie Heaps, Senior Scientist, SEI US, and he'll be talking to innovative tools for climate transitions.
Thank you very much, and hi everyone. Thanks for having me. So I've been asked to say a little bit about the tools that we've been developing here at SEI, and I'm going to focus on one in particular, which is the one that I've been working on for the last, I won't say how long, it's too long. But it's just an example of the tools that we create at SEI. So I'm going to mention this tool called LEAP, the Low Emissions Analysis Platform. But there's many other tools being developed at SEI that have really big global impact on all sorts of different topics. There's tools for water resource management. There's tools looking at the impacts of commodities trade. There's tools looking at climate adaptation. But I'll just mention the one that I've been working on, LEAP, the Low Emissions Analysis Platform. You can see a few statistics around there. It's something we've been working on for many, many years at SEI. And in fact, it actually predates SEI, if you can believe it. But it has grown to be a very major tool with a lot of application around the world. It's basically used in every country of the world now. And it's really grown to become the world's most popular tool for climate mitigation planning. So I wanted to sort of just reflect briefly on what makes Leap different compared to some of the other tools out there. So I've got a few images up here showing you, I think there's two things that make it different. One is the sort of the design approach, but I think the other one is the focus on people and development. So we've really had all along a mission to scale up scientifically sound energy planning, and Leap is really designed with that in mind. And really, right from the get-go, we've always sort of tried to put development at the core of what we're doing with Leap. So Leap is a tool for thinking about energy, climate mitigation, clean air planning, but always within that framing of putting development first. So the whole structure of the tool sort of focuses on the needs of populations in low and middle income countries first. Over time, it's grown to be used everywhere, but that's really always been our core target audience, the audience that we care about the most. We've structured it in a way that it's become very useful both as an analytical tool, but also as a tool for teaching and capacity building. So it's really been built to be used not just by expert modelers, but by a broader group of people, planners basically, planners, students, analysts. And I think another key thing that's made Leap different is that we've always sort of taken this sort of Kaizen idea of continuous improvement. So we've really been working on it to try and make it better and better for this very long period of time. I always think like one of our key, one of the key skills we bring is stubbornness, never saying die, keeping going, And another thing that makes it unique has been the dissemination approach as well. So we have this very unique model where the tool is made available for free to low-income, middle-income countries and small island developing states. But then we ask other people in the rich countries to make a contribution to the ongoing endeavor. And that's enabled us to really spread the tool very wide and have it very widely applied, but it's also helped us keep the whole effort going for a very long time. And maybe the last thing I should mention about what makes it different is we've always been trying to embrace the latest techniques and methodologies. For example, we're currently looking at embedding AI into the tool, but always with this idea of not leaving people behind. So we never want to make it too complicated for people to use. And I just want to show you a few of the things that people have been saying about Leap recently, just to give you some idea of sort of how it's been taken up and what it means to the people who use it. I think my favorite quote there is that it's become this sort of common language for planners around the world. So it's become a way for helping facilitate discussion about energy and climate futures. And I just want to say a quick thought then about some of the things that are coming next with Leap. Well, there's so many things we want to do with it, but always our goal is to try and make the science policy impact process more accessible and more understandable to a maximum number of people. So one of the things we're working on at the moment, for example, is a platform for publishing Leap results around the world so that it can be much more easily accessed by a much broader group of stakeholders, so that they can get access to the results that have been developed without the need to download, install, or license Leap. And then we're working on some exciting new ideas for the future. For example, trying to learn the lessons from all of the thousands of different Leap analyses that have been going on around the world. So an idea for the future is to look at sort of new AI-based tools that can actually learn lessons and give feedback to people to improve climate transparency and to improve the modeling that's going on. Thank you, I'll leave it at that.
Our next speaker is Matthew Fielding, Head of Project Communications and Impact Division, SCI Headquarters, talking about how SCI drives impact and change.
Thank you, Arti. So you'll have seen today, we're all in the impact business here in SCI, be it lithium mining, pastoral farming, working with school children on air quality. We drive societal impact and change through our research and implementation work, through diverse teams and through our global offices. We're steered by the needs and the perspectives of many of you here in the audience, of the communities that are connected to our regional centres. And we recognise that the time for visualising those bigger changes and those bigger impacts that we want to see is not at the point of publishing our reports, but it comes in those corridors and in those discussions that we have with our partners in our research teams, where we can actually reflect on what is the societal value that we can achieve out with individual projects and that are in line with the bigger changes we want to see. Our diverse expertise in policy, communications, monitoring, evaluation and learning, finance, fundraising strengthens the decisions that are able to be made globally within the areas of environment and sustainability. And as one impact thinking champion, I've never been known to be frustrating my colleagues, of course, but I've studied over the last few years to ask questions when we talk about our research, such as why, so what, and then what, for who? And I don't do that just to be annoying. I do that to change and build a culture of this reflection and of accountability in our research. Rather than thinking of the research goals in itself, we think wider than that on the broader impacts that we want to achieve. This enables us to see opportunities as they arise and to pivot towards those, to be a much more nimble organisation. So thinking beyond the projects and into strategic roles and relationships. How we can partner for impact, and we very much see that our collaboration is greater than the sum of our parts. In our new strategy, we work across 4 interconnected outcomes: changing agendas, enhancing capacities, improving decisions and accelerating implementation. And as the custodian of SEI's monitoring, evaluation and learning facility, we work to develop those internal mechanisms that exist behind the research within the organisation that can capture those changes as they occur and enable to present them in our results. Why do we do that? We use that to both inform, to refine our work, to empower both internally and externally. And how do you see that impact in action? Well, you can catch it in our latest annual report, following that link there, and you can see some of these longer term changes that we have, looking at co-leading the first European climate risk assessment, working with clean air in Africa, and on circular textiles from Estonia, translating that into Kenya as well. So thank you. With that, I'll leave it.
Before I come to Katie, I'm going to take what you said, Matthew, partnering for impact and being greater than the sum of our parts. And I'd like to ask one of our partners from the Office of Natural Water Resources in Thailand, the Secretary General, Dr. Susari Kitamonen, to talk about your perspectives on partnering with SEI.
Thank you. Dear SEI colleague, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you to SEI to give me a very good opportunity to be here today. And on behalf of the Office of National Water Resources of Thailand, I would like to say that SEI has been a long-standing and valued partner of ONWR, and we have worked together on many meaningful initiatives. Let me share 2 good examples of our collaboration under the Mekong Lanchang Cooperation Framework. The first one is the Building Water Sector Youth Leadership Network in the Mekong Lanchang region project. Is created a potential network of young leaders from the 6 Mekong countries. As the National Water Policy Agency in Thailand, ONWR, realized the tremendous gains from developing a new generation of youth who are not only interested in water resources management, but are also able to collaborate across borders. This young leader can bring valuable knowledge and experience back to their home countries, while also fostering long-term collaboration with their counterparts throughout the regions. The second example is the project on promoting climate smart water technology and innovative for sustainable water resources and rice production. This project is a case example of applying smart water management and irrigation technologies at the field level. It has helped farmers reduce water usage by 20 to 40%. More importantly, it has built the capacity of farmers, water user groups, and government officials to understand and apply this innovation effectively. This project shows how we can jointly invest in smart solutions for the future agriculture, water security, and water productivity. Hence, SCI plays a vital role in supporting ONWR, especially when it comes to turning ideas into action. As a national policy agency, we often take the lead on policy directions, but partnerships like the one with SCI allow us to go further by bringing in technical expertise, research capacity, and regional collaboration networks. One good example is the joint community research on livelihood adaptation in Mekong. This project is a collaboration among SCI, ONWR, the Mekong River Commission, and local communities. It uses participatory methods and gender-inclusive approach to explore how communities adapt to the impacts of climate change and water resource development, focusing on real-world solutions for resilience, equity, and sustainability. With the future in mind, the value of this partnership is even clearer. It teaches guest honor and pleasure to sign the MOU between SEI and ONWR this morning. After signing the MOU, we will have co-developing a new 3 years action plan and establish joint steering committee for further implementation. This includes joint work on trans-boundary water resources management, early warning system, nature-based solutions, and regional youth leadership. Together, we are not only designing projects, but we also implementing solutions that make a real impact on people and ecosystem in the Mekong region. So ACI is not just a partner on paper. It is hand-on only that helps us deliver meaningful results on the ground. I would like to warmly invite other organizations to collaborate with ONWR and SCI, from trans-boundary water management to early warning, climate adaptation, and nature-based solutions. We face challenges that require shared actions. Our work with SCI shows that real impact happens when science, policy, and local knowledge come together. We are eager to expand this model with partners who bring fresh ideas, technologies, expertise, and resources. Let's work together to build climate resilient communities and sustainable water solutions for the region and beyond. Thank you.
I think we need to invite Dr. Kitimonen back to stage more often, actually. Our next speaker is Catherine Brown, Research Fellow and Team Lead, SEI Headquarters, talking on why policy coherence is the next big thing.
Thanks. Yeah. First of all, sorry for rushing the stage. Just take it as a sign of my enthusiasm. Second of all, why is policy coherence the next big thing? I'm going to have to persuade you in 5 minutes. I'm really waiting for someone to give me an easy job around here, but I'm going to do my best. OK, so we've heard a lot today about the intertwined challenges of economic growth and security and sustainable development, also climate change. And policy coherence really, at its most basic level, is about how we try to do all of these things at once, and in particular, how we try to do one of them when it makes doing another one of them harder. So with our work at SEI, we think a lot about this in the context of climate and development. And for example, how do governments try to bring electricity to the hundreds of millions of people in the world who still don't have it, which requires extracting and burning coal in many parts of the world, while also trying to reduce carbon emissions? And this is a huge challenge. And SEI has a long history of leadership in this space, and in particular in thinking about methods for and approaches to understand these interactions between the different types of policies and approaches we might take to address these intertwined challenges. So for example, we've done a lot of work with what we call policy matrices, which help us to identify synergies, which is places where doing one thing can make it easier to do another, and also trade-offs, which is places where maybe making progress on one set of goals actually undermines progress towards another set of goals. We've also looked, for example, at particularly global agendas and the connections between the objectives and sustainable development goals and the commitments that countries make under their nationally determined contributions, which is their climate commitments. And the basic idea behind this work and these tools is that if governments and decision makers better understand these interactions, then they'll be able to capitalize on the synergies and mitigate the trade-offs, and we can make collective progress. So we've also heard a lot today about inequality, and I was actually joined SEI to kind of ask the next order question about policy coherence, which is like, how do we do this on climate and development, achieve these goals simultaneously, while also trying to reduce inequality? So we can add just another layer of complexity there. And when we think about this in terms of global agendas, the overarching principle we recall a lot is what is called leave no one behind, which is basically the idea that as we progress, we should be making progress for the most vulnerable groups in society. And I have to say, make a little confession here, which is that when I came to SEI, I was super not persuaded by the concept of policy coherence, even though it's what I was hired to do. I mean, from a scientific perspective, I was like, this is so complex. Nobody can even decide how to define it, nevertheless analyze it or measure it. And also, I'm not completely convinced that actually, if people understand these interactions better, they'll actually be able to better manage them. Nevertheless, we pushed on, and we for the last 4 years have been asking this question, does policy coherence help governments reduce inequality? And so we've been looking at this across 8 countries. I actually have to read the list because I can only remember 7 at once. So that's Australia, Colombia, Fiji, Germany, Kenya, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and South Africa. And in all 8 of these countries, we've had locally grounded organizations who have been conducting interviews, doing sort of reams of policy analysis, like the matrices we've showed. And in the end, we ended up distilling all of our findings into a single diagram, which I find so fulfilling. And this is like hot off the press, guys. Basically, what we found, so if you look at the top row, that is the efforts to promote coherence. And the yellow is good things, it's coherence. And the red and the maroon are bad things, it's incoherence, or where those efforts have failed. And then the middle row is the outcomes of that, or the consequences. And we think about these in terms of benefits and burdens. Did these coherence efforts yield good things or bad things for groups in society? And then along the bottom, you see the groups that are sort of benefiting or bearing those burdens. And basically what we found is across these 8 countries, which are very diverse, very different contexts, is first of all, that coherence leads to good things. It's mostly yellow leading to more yellow. And also that incoherence leads to burdens and negative things. That's not a huge surprise, but it is a good empirical finding. What is important here is that actually when we have coherence, we see that it benefits all groups in society, or almost all groups in society. And in contrast, where we have incoherence or where those efforts are unsuccessful, it disproportionately burdens vulnerable groups. So the big takeaway here is not only is coherence very important for collective progress, but for equal collective progress. And this is a particularly important finding as we look, for example, at what happens after the SDGs in 2030. Do these kind of frameworks that try to integrate all of our approaches together, do they matter? And I think that the major finding here is that they do matter. So we see a lot of complexity, but there are also tools to help decision makers navigate that complexity. Thank you.
Our last speaker will speak to something we've heard a number of times during the day, and also saying to what Catherine was talking about, tools to navigate complexity. Soumya Joshi, Head of Division, SEI Headquarters, talking about AI and the future of sustainable development.
Thank you. And I promise I have no Sankey diagrams to show you right now, but in a very short presentation, I'll walk you through some exciting areas where SEI is working with AI and how it is truly a cross-cutting topic that affects much of our research. So the first area is the material footprint of AI, and given SEI's work on environment, this is a critical area where we examine both the environmental footprint of AI and also where AI can be instrumental in achieving environmental targets. So you heard during the course of today a lot about critical minerals, water, energy, and these happen to be the building blocks that are propping up the AI development race. And at SEI, we want to understand what is this non-negligible cost that the world is paying, and where are those burdens? Where is it that the compute sits? Where is it that the energy is being extracted? What are the water-scarce regions where data centers are being put? And how is this then translating into the rewards? Where are those being concentrated? A recent IEA report that just came out showed the trajectories of energy use and water use. And if you look on my right-hand side, you see that just between now and 2030, water usage is going to double. And when we try to understand where is this water scarcity, where is this water being used, it's not just in the cooling of the servers and the data centers, it's in the production of the semiconductors, the chips, the GPUs. And really to get to grips with the kind of scope 3 or the LCA aspects of this is where SEI is particularly well placed to understand. And on the left-hand side, you see the sort of energy projections from a number of studies, and that also is quite shocking in terms of how much energy is needed today to really drive this truly revolutionary socio-technical phenomenon that is AI. Another area that we work on, and you just heard Katie talk about policy coherence, there is an absolute lack of coherence right now when it comes to AI governance. It's hugely fragmented, and this is really an area where I feel we can add insights on. Accountability and transparency in supply chains is also an area that is not new to SEI. I mean, we have the TRACE initiative, we have excellent work using data in a way to bring governments and companies to make them accountable. And the same applies to AI. Futures and scenarios, we spoke about strategic foresight today, and that is exactly where AI is being used to imagine new futures, to actually revolutionize the way we create scenarios or future projections that then industries and governments can work towards. Some low-hanging fruits like Earth observation, blue AI, the use of AI in oceans and plastics removal. These are the more positive and promising aspects of where AI is being used in the environmental domain and can speed up transition. What is worth thinking about is the geopolitics of this and the sort of false dichotomy we are often faced with, that either you have innovation or you are bogged down by regulation. And the EU in particular right now is feeling this pressure that somehow we need to catch up with the US and we need to perform globally, and it's lowering standards. And I think this is that inflection point where we need to make a stand and say, no, you can actually have innovation and you can actually have progress in this particular technological domain whilst having a strong eye on things like climate, transboundary risk, and how this can be done in a just and sustainable way. And finally, what I leave you with is quite an interesting idea about how security and sustainability come together. So you hear today a lot of calls for what is called sovereign AI. So the idea that we really bring onshore here our data centers, our energy, our water, and really chip production, the entire supply chain or value chain to make it here. Now, what this does is it gives you an open and distributed architecture as opposed to the current architecture, which is very much reliant on different regions of the world that are at risk. So it's really the sort of tension that you see here is that in the future development of AI, is it going to be the sovereign lens that makes us more secure? Or is it the more global commons approach, the idea that actually we have to do this together, that there needs to be global cooperation between different regions that have a stake in this? And we are at exactly that point today where we see that there is a lot of extractive narratives, a lot of things pushing us towards almost kind of like making things very small, isolated, and here model, as opposed to the more distributed, open source one, which is built on the idea of collaboration. So it's very much our choice in which direction we end up going. So I stop there. Thank you.
And just to remind our guests in the room, you've all been pre-allocated tables for discussion from the inspirational speed talks you've just heard. Now, our next speaker is an external reflection. These moments for external reflection really challenge our thinking, allow us to sharpen the way we want to take things forward, and obviously create opportunities for partnership. I welcome on stage Marie Trogstam, Head of Sustainability in the Infrastructure Department for Svenskt Näringsliv, Confederation of Swedish Industry. Earlier today, Romanus spoke for Africa. You speak for business. You are here as business, and we cannot do this without you. You heard a lot today this morning about the ways in which we want to take things forward, the competing priorities that are at stake. We'd love to hear what you think.
Thank you so much, and thank you also for the opportunity to end the whole afternoon, because I'm so inspired and I look forward to bring the business perspective, so thank you. And actually I want to start off with just emphasizing and stress that the green transition is ongoing in the business community. You quite often hear that it's a bubble, it's stopping, but it's not. I meet companies from the northern to the southern part of Sweden and the companies of different sizes, and they are investing. And also, as the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise, we represent 60,000 Swedish companies, and we asked through our company panel, and about 50% of the replicants said that we are investing in the climate transition. So just to emphasize that, the opportunity that is ongoing. And also, I would say, not only in a Swedish perspective, but the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise had the opportunity to bring forward the chairmanship of the platform Swedish Leadership for Sustainable Development from SIDA. And when we meet with business organizations and companies in countries as Colombia and Morocco, as you have been mentioning during the afternoon, we meet the same ambitions. So a forward-leaning company, I mean, independent of the geography, is also focusing on the transition in some extent. But the focus need then, from a business perspective, to be on the enabling policies, and you've been mentioning also that. And it's well known by this time, but you need the fossil-free energy and the grid. You need to have a robust and reliable transport infrastructure. I would also say that skills development is one of the major areas that the companies bring forward, and also a predictable regulatory framework. But also, and this is it's something I would really like to discuss further on with all of you, the role of circular economy as one important tool to solve many of the other challenges. And there we need to have the market-based conditions to enable the scaling up of innovative solutions. So that's also a focus area from not only the Swedish business community. And we also often speak about the Swedish leadership and what do we mean by that. And it's based on the decoupling. We have a little bit of a glitch now, but until now we've seen that the emissions has been decreasing while simultaneously the economic growth has been increasing. So that's also in order to inspire others to follow, that is important to keep focusing on. And I would also say that we speak about Swedish exports in terms of actually kind of pushing away more emissions-intensive production due to our reliance on an almost fossil-free energy supply, and that's also, of course, important. But about 40% of Swedish exports are dependent on imports. So yes, once again, emphasizing, as you also been mentioning, the importance of global value chains. So once again, that point. So I think I would like to also mention the opportunity side. I think we all know also from your research, but I usually bring forward the World Economic Forum report on the global risks. As from a business perspective, in the 2-year, the short-term perspective, the business is emphasizing the risk of interstate conflict and also the social polarization. But in the 10 years' time, it's the loss of biodiversity, extreme weather, and also climate change. And as a business, you need to address both the short and long term. So that's once again coming back to what you are doing, and as I would say that SEI is so well positioned because you have the holistic perspective, and we need to address, as you've been mentioning, the pollution, climate change, but also loss of biodiversity simultaneously, and also with the social dimensions. And you've been presenting here the LEAP, the AI, but also the policy cohesion towards the 2030 agenda, and that is, of course, really important. And also one other important aspect, facts and figures in terms of actually making the brave decisions that are needed. So then, of course, we need to have the facts to base them correctly on. And just one dimension that I would also like to state from the business sector to keep the EU climate targets. And of course, with a clean industrial deal that still emphasizes competitiveness, resilience, but also the fossil-free economy and the emissions reduction. So that's something to keep. And yes, I think I will kind of end with this more optimistic view, but we need to act. And as you said, this partnership for impact, I think that's a very, very nice framing of today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Predictability in turbulent times, not a bad thing to look forward to. Our last speaker to close this session on stage is also Person Research Director and Deputy Director SEI to provide concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Arati, and thank you everyone, all the speakers today, the guests, and everyone joining us. This was a smorgasbord, I think, of some of the research topics we work on and some of the geographies around the world that we work in. So SEI is today a 36-year-old institution. And I think we have, during these 36 years, acquired some life wisdom, learned some lessons. We have an idea of how do we try to bridge science, policy, and practice, but as a 36-year-old, also considering ourselves young and fresh and still eager to learn and take inspiration and inputs from our partners and stakeholders around the world. So I think what we wanted to take this opportunity, in particular with our external guests here today, is to also remind you that we do have a global presence today. We have 8 centers in 7 countries. You heard from them, some of them here. So do consider SEI as a resource also to work in other parts of the world. We also believe in science diplomacy. So this is the idea that science can act as a convener, especially addressing some more difficult, sensitive topics sometimes. We know, for example, the difficult geopolitics at the moment. But also when we pursue climate goals, biodiversity goals, economic growth, security, we will end up with goal conflicts. So how can science be a sort of meeting place to try and resolve those conflicts in an evidence-based way. So we heard the State Secretary opening with saying that Sweden aspires to lead the green transition through technological developments. And interestingly, actually in the statutes of SEI, our task as an institute was to assess technologies. So I think what we have learned again over these 36 years is that we need to do that in a holistic way, just like you said, Marie. So it's about understanding not just the potential of the technology, of course, and how can we accelerate its diffusion and uptake, but really what are the local impacts, social impacts, economic, environmental impacts. And I think some of the examples we heard about reminded us of this, for example, when it comes to mining projects and also the uptake of wind power in Colombia specifically. We also need to understand the global interdependencies and how are these new technologies affecting or creating new supply chains, who are benefiting from them. And I think the million-dollar question that I feel as research director we would love to have some very good answers to is what are the new supply chains of the future, in particular for lower income countries and settings? What is beyond the fossil economy, the nature depleting economy, and the polluting economy? So I think I want to end in the spirit of opportunities and optimism. And I think what I bring with me from this short afternoon would be also, yes, we are pursuing transitions in turbulent times, but how can we really describe even more fully and in a better way what are we transitioning to? Not just the climate targets, but really what is that society that is promising a better life? So with that, thank you very much. I hand back to you, Arati, for final words. Thank you.
Very much. So ladies and gentlemen, we will now end our online streaming and we say thank you very much to our online audience. And I'll wait for the signal to keep talking.